Hello, and welcome back to Writing to Be Free. I'm calling this our 4-day writing challenge based on Penny Baker's idea of therapeutic writing in 20 minutes, 4 days consecutively. I talked about in my previous video how I'm kind of doing this as research as I develop my online course, but also for all of us who are watching and participating, just to move us to another level of healing. There's lots of research out there about the healing benefits that come from therapeutic writing. So in the previous video, I shared with you the writing prompt. And when I shared it, I said I hadn't read any of his writings about the reflection process and how to process the writing, because I didn't want to be tainted. Now I read it because I did my prompt and I read the material, and I want to go through that part. Hopefully you have done also the work of doing that writing prompt, spent 20 minutes writing continuously. And now you are also ready to reflect. So if you have done that, then the first thing I'm going to say to you is congratulations, you did it. The first writing session is always going to be the hardest. Just getting used to it and really starting to explore on this level. I think some of you may find that you kind of open yourself up a little bit more than sitting down and talking to another person, a therapist or a friend. It's just you and a piece of paper, or you and your computer. And that could be kind of a daunting thing, but also very freeing, because as we've said before, you can say whatever because nobody else is going to read this. So you got through the biggest hurdle, was just sitting down and writing. And now we're going to process. So I want to talk a little bit about the pre-steps, and I want you to share. You can put it in the chat box here if you want to share what you did for the self-care part, how you took care of yourself before you started writing. For me, I spent just a few moments in quiet meditation. I said a prayer just to kind of guard my heart and to be open to whatever comes up. I did that, and then I set my phone for 20 minutes, and then I got down to business. I wrote in my bedroom because that's a very calming space. I lit a candle. I brought that to show you. I bought this candle at Michael's. It's lavender. Oh, it smells so good. You know how some candles, when you light them, you can't really smell the scent. But this one, and I got it on sale, which is even better. It smells really lavendery. It's beautiful. So I lit my candle, I sat down, and I started writing. So the prompt was just for the first day to just talk about your traumatic experience, to write about that, and whatever. He gave a lot of things you can connect it to, and whatever comes up, what's been on your mind. And for me, I knew. So for those of you who don't know my story, just briefly, I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, um, from around the age of 5 to 7. That took place. I would say that it was my mom's boyfriend's nephews who abused me when I would come home from school. They would be my babysitters. Um, and so I went through that experience, and it's kind of something I've been writing about in various ways for many years. But now we want to move to the next level of healing. So that's the thing I decided to write about. But I had just started listening to on audiobook the Viola Davis memoir, which is very powerful, very touching. And she has it's a remarkable story because she's been through so much childhood trauma of abuse, growing up in a home where there was domestic violence, sexual abuse, poverty, a lot of trauma, and just to see the beautiful, vibrant flower that she's bloomed into is amazing. But just before I started writing my prompt, she was talking about in the book how in a therapy session, the therapist was really trying to connect her with the child in her that had been abused, and that was something that she had been kind of avoiding, but now she was taking a step of kind of recognizing that child, um, the strength of the child that went through all that, and if it wasn't for that child who was strong enough to endure all of that abuse, she wouldn't be where she is today. And she was really trying to acknowledge that part of herself. um, and that's what I decided I wanted to write about for myself. So I got down to business and I started writing, really acknowledging that little girl who went through so much. I don't know if at my age today, if I went through those things, I could endure it. But to be 5 years old and dealing with rape, and threats and all those things, and still find a way to have joy, to laugh, to still be a child in the midst of all those things, and to keep your mind together. Um, that's one, the grace of God, but also the strength of that inner child. So I wanted to really acknowledge that child in my writing. So I did a lot of writing about that. And when it was all over, I did my 20 minutes. I probably went over by about 10 minutes, because I knew that would happen once I got started. I was probably going to go over, but I got through it. And so then I went into the book, and I looked at what did he say to do for the processing part. And that's the part I want to share with you guys. So this is what he says. He has 5 questions that you need to answer to help process your experience. And you're going to respond to all 5 of the questions on this scale. So you can even take a screenshot of this scale and use it going forward. And for each of the questions, you're going to rate it between 0 and 10. 0 meaning your experience was not at all. 5 is in the middle at somewhat, and then 10, the highest level, would be a great deal. Your experience was a great deal of that. So for each of the questions, we're going to go through the questions, and you can rate it for yourself, 0 through 10, 0 being at the lower end, not at all, to 10, a great deal. Okay, you ready? Let's do it. So for his first question, to what degree did you express your deepest thoughts and feelings? I said 9 for myself. And I'm just sharing just to see to show you how it works. You don't have to, your numbers will probably be different than mine. So I'm not telling you how to answer, I'm just sharing so you can see how I processed. Um, and I said 9, probably because I really don't like to be on extremes. There's probably more I could have shared, but I shared a lot. I went to places I probably had not really explored because I've never really, a couple of times I've talked to that inner, like write a letter to your inner child and those kinds of things. But this was a real deep dive in 20 minutes. So I went pretty deep, but I probably could have gone deeper. So I gave myself a 9 for that. Expressing my deepest thoughts and feelings. And there was still probably a part of me that censored some things, like I don't want to offend, the adults in my life, that maybe they could have. So I was kind of hesitant about that, and that's something I need to push through. But I tried, and I would say I got to a 9 on that level. And this is not about right or wrong. It's not about you did really well because you wrote down a 9. It's just about where you were. That's all. You're just kind of gauging where you were. So there's no right or wrong. It's not great if you scored yourself a 10 here, or if you scored a 1. It just kind of shows where you were at this moment. And this will be relevant later on as we go through the process. Number 2, to what degree do you currently feel sad or upset? So right after, so if you've just written the prompt, and now you're sitting down and processing it, how do you feel? So for me, I put that one as how sad or upset do I feel? I put it at like a 5, because I was sad. I really expected to cry a lot because I am a crier. My grandmother used to call me a waterhead, because I cry all the time. I cry when I'm happy, I cry when I'm sad, I cry when other people cry, I cry all the time. So I expected to cry. I cry in a really good movie, a sad movie, or a happy movie. So I expected to cry, but I didn't even really cry until about 10 minutes in. which kind of surprised me. And then afterwards, I think once I got it out, yeah, it's sad. So just to think about going through those things, of course, I was sad. I wouldn't say I was upset. I had stopped crying. And so I was just a little down after all of that. So I would say for that, I was at a 5. And then to what degree do you currently feel happy? I put that at a 3 because I was not happy, honestly. Um, Talking to the little girl in me who survived all of that, I was not happy. So I think that makes sense. And that's where I was. So yeah, nothing more to say about that. And then to what degree was today's writing valuable or meaningful for you? I put that one up at a 7. Um, I do feel like there's benefit in working through those things, especially when they come up. Like I in listening to that audiobook, she was talking about a lot of things, but that was the thing that stuck with me. So when something sticks with me, I feel like it stuck with me for a reason. So maybe I need to explore that a little bit further. And I really felt like for me, I should honor that little girl. Um, who was a warrior, and I wanted to really celebrate. So I guess that by the end of the writing, I was in a better place because I really started to celebrate that little girl who held it together in the midst of all that and kept. I mean, she had to keep me. I had to keep quiet with all these things that were happening, and I was afraid a lot. But I held it together, and so I wanted to acknowledge that part and parts of me that had to be sacrificed. I didn't get to have that childhood innocence that I see in other little girls around me that I always want to protect when I see them. I didn't get that. And so I wanted to acknowledge that little girl in me and just tell her, thank you for hanging in there. Thank you for enduring what you endured. Thank you for keeping me together that I am where I am today. And we're just going to keep on living and living well to bring meaning and purpose to those experiences. So I really found doing that writing today very meaningful because I think that's a part of me. And maybe for some of you, you can relate to it that doesn't get acknowledged. That I think for many of us, we just want to kind of forget that part of ourselves and push it down and maybe God forbid if we ever go through trauma again, we can draw on that. But we just don't want to think about that part of us anymore. But it's a real part of who we are. And I think getting to a place of healing and wholeness is learning how to integrate that part of us, not forgetting it, but learning how to incorporate that part of ourselves is important. So I did find value. I did find meaning in that part of this exercise. And again, you didn't have to write about that. You could have wrote about almost anything. Whatever was in your heart at the time is really what you should be writing about. And then he says, lastly, briefly describe how your writing went today so you may refer to this later, because he envisions that down the line, you're going to go back. You're going to do this 20 minutes, 4 days consecutively every week for a period of time. And so to see how you're growing, how you're changing, you want to kind of document this. So when you write down these numbers, you can put it on a separate piece of paper, or if you're going to save your writing, whatever it is you wrote, you can write it right at the end of that. It's up to you how you want to handle that part. But he envisions that you're going to go back and periodically check in and see, are you growing? Are you seeing any change? Are you seeing any differences? So here, he just wants you to kind of describe how the writing went. So briefly, emphasis there, briefly. So I just kind of talked about how it took me 10 minutes before I started crying. And then I went a little bit over the time. I just kind of just basically described the highlights of the writing experience itself, and how I felt. That I felt a little sad, but I didn't feel traumatized. I cried, but I didn't go into like hyperventilation or that kind of thing. I shed tears. That's what I would say. So I kind of just noted how I felt in the process and really what happened in that process. And so those are the 5 questions. It's really easy, but you do want to take that time after you do the writing to kind of reflect almost immediately after you're done. When you're ready to sit down and sit within yourself in quiet and see where you are, and just ask yourself those 5 questions and rate it on the scale. Um, and then again, as time passes, you'll go back and reflect and see where you are. Are you making progress in these areas? So that those are the 5 questions. So I want to keep talking about self-care. We always want to make sure that we're checking in on the self-care end. How are you doing? How are you feeling? How was I feeling afterwards? So self-care before, I had my quiet meditation time. I lit my candle and I started the during process. I was writing in a place that was very soothing for me. My bedroom has soothing green, seafoam green walls. I have a nice feathered down comforter on my bed. So it's very cozy space. I had the candles lit, everything like that. So the during part, I had good self-care. I was in a safe place. Um, I, and no interruptions or distractions. So I wasn't worried about someone bursting in and interrupting me or anything like that. And then afterwards, so make sure that you take care of yourself afterwards. Um, I wrote after work today. So when I came home from work, one, I was proud that I was writing, because sometimes when I come home from work, I want to take a nap. But I did the writing first. And then I put on some music that was kind of um, spa like music. I went to a spa day a couple of months ago, and the music, usually they have like ocean, sounds of the ocean. But this place, they had like harps. It was this harp music, and it was so beautiful and soothing. So I found that on my Spotify and I put that on, and it was just very relaxing. And I kind of laid there and just kind of decompressed. And eventually I fell asleep, which wasn't really that surprising because I normally would have fallen asleep when I come home from work. So that was fine. But I did take the time to kind of take care of myself. I didn't get up and start working. I didn't get up and start cooking dinner or any of those things. I wanted to take some time, which I highly encourage all of you to do, to take some time to take care of yourself. Doing that writing, you may be opening up some things, and always be paying attention to any lingering effects. If the sadness is carrying over to the next day, or you don't want to get out of bed, or some harmful thoughts are coming to mind, then we need to shift to maybe taking some other steps of talking to someone about it. And I'm going to include some links to some resources that you can try if you feel like you do need to talk to somebody, because I think that's just important. The goal, keep always in mind, the goal is we want to move to the next level of healing. We don't want to sink ourselves down. We don't want to bring ourselves down. We want to uplift, right? Doesn't that sound better? So always make sure you take care of yourself and have that in place before you start this. Already have in place what are your self-care steps going to be? What's going to be your before, what's going to be your during, and what's going to be your after. Always have that in place so you're not scrambling or you get distracted and you don't do it. You want to make sure you're doing it. And that's it for today and processing the first of our writing prompts. Tomorrow, I will share the next writing prompts, and in a separate video, I will also we'll go through the process again, these same questions, and process that experience too. That's day 2 of this challenge. So I hope to see you, and I hope you keep up with this, and I hope you'll find some benefit in this process. So take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.